approach?
Hello, good day to everybody. It's my pleasure to talk about a protein scaffold today, which may allow you to develop the ideal FAP-targeted ligands. So these are my disclosures. I'm the CDO for Navigo Proteins, and the program is a collaboration with ITM and Navigo Proteins. Talking one sentence about this collaboration. Of course, we're very happy to have such a strong partner. We feel that there are a lot of synergies, us being experts in protein engineering and ITM having strong experience in development and all the other aspects which are necessary to bring successful products to the market. And maybe last not least, the strong belief in FAP as a target in this program and the commitment and passion to bring it to patients. So I think patients is a good way to start, to ask what do patients need, and I also believe that it's very appropriate to have the summit under the umbrella of the ICPO, in keeping always the patient in mind with whatever we do. So I would argue that what patients need is options, full stop. So we know that they're in the advanced stages of diseases, they many times don't have many. They need therapeutic options, making the points, also think about yesterday that for imaging, it looks like there are already good, adequate solutions available, but for therapy, we will have to see, and of course the need there is still higher. And with the synergistic options, I wanted to make the point that in radiotherapy, and maybe even more so in FAP targeted radiotherapy, we would have to think about synergies and combinations early. And that could be, non-targeted therapies, it could be targeted therapies, it could be immuno-oncology, it could be other stromal targets, and that's more or less what I wanted to show with the illustration on the left. So when you want to design your ideal ligand, there's some key features you need to think about. No surprise, affinity, half-life, and the different strategies to do so. But what I want to show you today is a specific strategy with dimerization and albumin binding domains to come closer to what your ideal ligand could look like. So in terms of terminology, these are the two building blocks, modules we're using for the experiment. Our ephelin platform, essentially ubiquitin scaffold, about 9 kilodaltons in size. Of course, we have extensive libraries. We modify surface residues to create ligands to all kinds of targets, and you can reach affinities of around, let's say, single-digit nanomolar affinities, or even lower, even picomolar affinities. The same or similar concept for what we call the head, so a half-life extending albumin binding domain. Again, a small scaffold, 5 kilodaltons, which we can also modify to have different affinities in binding to albumin, human albumin, but also mouse albumin. Here we come to the experiment, and mind you, I say exploratory in the attempt to save animals. This was not designed with any confirmatory intention, but more exploratory to generate hypothesis. This is basically the 4 constructs we tested. So first you see one ephelin fused to one head, 2 ephelin fused to one head, one effluent fused to two head domains, and then the two to form it. You see the respective sizes of these constructs and also the affinities here. This was done in our own FAP expressing show cell line. And yeah, I will not read all the details to you in this case. Let's move on to the results. In this case, you can, well, let me first explain the icons. So the gray line would be the 1+1 design, the black line would be the 2 effluent plus 1 head design, and the blue lines would be, here the 1+2 and so on. What we can see is, the one head design with a faster blood clearance, and the two head design slightly slower clearance. And if you talk about half-lives, there's actually a very good fit. So the one head design has a half-life of about 30 hours, and the two head design about 30%. Not very surprising, you might say. This is what more or less what we intended, but of course that's very good. No, you have a design here which is very predictable and which we can use across many different binders then to generate the affinity and half-life we need. Moving on to tumor uptake, here again you see the different constructs, and first we wanted to compare what happens when you move from one effluent to two effluents. So in this case, from the gray line, one effluent, to the black line, two effluents, or from the light blue line, one effluent to the dark blue. And the two elements which call your attention are, if you look at the black line, there seems to be a faster early uptake in this construct, in these conditions. And that could be relevant, of course, if you're talking about imaging in a diagnostic area. And then also very interestingly, in these double effluent constructs, what you see is you move, moving from the one effluent design to the two effluent designs, what I would call a prolonged, a sustained uptake, especially at the later time points. So when you think about therapy, that might actually be a very interesting concept. Here we're looking then at the same graph and now focusing on what happens when you move from one head to a two-head version. So for instance, from the gray line to the light blue line, one head version to two heads, or from the black to the blue. And in the first case, you see a difference mainly in the around the 72-hour time frame. Let's word it that way. And of course, when you move from in the double effluent construct, if you move from one head to two heads, you see again quite a sustained, prolonged uptake in the tumor. And mind you, I mean, this is a time point where the activity circulating in the blood or in all the other organs is already very low. So it's, I would say that is quite remarkable. Of course, we also looked at other organs. I think, liver, I would skip. It's nothing to report. You see uptakes of around 3 or 4% and declining over time. Kidney is always a little more critical, as you know, for small protein scaffolds. They might face the scavenger mechanism in the kidneys. So you pay attention to that, but also here you see that with one head, which are basically these two lines, you have uptakes of below 10%. And if you look at the two-head versions, I might say quite interestingly, you have a step change with even lower affinities. Yes, the obligatory image, and sorry if I only have this one in this case. You see basically what we have talked about before. So you see the blood pool at the early time point, and then the tumor accumulation at later time points. And yes, that already brings me to a conclusion in the sense of, what do we see? So we see that dimerization may be an interesting concept to increase uptake and especially reach a prolonged and sustained uptake in the tumor. The two head domains may help you to improve the kidney profile, so it could be very relevant in that sense, and also the retention in the blood, not so surprisingly, I would say. And what we haven't talked about much yet is the size, but there is really no obvious effect, at least no obvious detrimental effect, in the sense that larger constructs take more time to penetrate the tumor or cannot accumulate in the tumor. That's something we don't see, which is good news in this case. You might say a small data set, a snippet, yeah, interesting, but I think the most interesting here is the implications for the future. And that's very much in line with what we've heard already yesterday from Frank Rush, for instance, and also today. The possibility to use these dimers, or even, more binding moieties in a construct, seems to be quite enticing. And then also the possibility to combine that with the heterodimers. So additional targets in the construct. If you then talk or think about the prolonged uptake, I think this could be very relevant for therapeutic applications. The head domains, I think here, of course, you would aim to produce an even wider range to very predictably custom design the affinities to albumin you need and want, and also have a very predictable outcome when you put it into in vivo conditions. And in terms of size, I think the good conclusion here is that at least in the range that we've tested here, there's no detrimental negative effect. So you could actually use all these building blocks to achieve what you want to achieve for your ideal ligand. So in summary, I would say it's quite an interesting concept here, this modular approach, which could allow you to very quickly custom design the ligand with exactly the properties you want and need for your specific situations, which could of course be different depending on what you want to achieve in a given patient. So